Who's That Knocking at My Window? By Charlie Keats. Ever since leaving my parents' home, I'd always wanted a house of my own, something bigger and grander than the small apartments I'd hopped between while I was at university. I'd seen this place on a few previous occasions, but back then, it was simply a place I couldn't afford. An empty home at the edge of town, something to admire and work towards. Now, it was my new home. The property itself sat in a large gap of grassland, surrounded by thick woods, and the only visible connection to civilization was a gravel driveway that led into one end of the forest, and eventually, the motorway. The two-story house had come furnished, and the only thing left to do was unpack the few boxes that were dotted around the house. Nothing more than clothes, books, and other miscellaneous affairs. I went up the stairs and decided to have another look around the place, and even though I had already checked it a dozen times before finalizing the paperwork, if anything, it seemed the whitewashed walls and hardwood floors were cleaner and more polished than my last visit. The bright light of the early evening pierced through the windows, promising a pleasant conclusion to a lovely day in shades of darkening orange. I signed the letting agency's paperwork earlier that morning and had begun unpacking around noon. I wanted to empty the rest of my boxes as soon as possible, but the labours of the day weighed on me and I was physically exhausted, though still mentally wide awake. I concluded the only reasonable thing to do was just relax. I trudged down the stairs into the living room, picked up the book I was halfway through, flicked on the nearby lamp and plopped myself down on the couch. I must have passed out shortly afterwards, because I suddenly woke up with a jolt, confused and disoriented. The book lay open on the floor, face down and disregarded. It took me a while for my senses to sharpen back into focus. When they did, however, I recoiled when I looked out towards the glass sliding door across from me. I pushed myself to the edge of the couch as far as I could, a scream caught in my throat. Beyond the window was a malevolent humanoid figure. The weak light from the lamp only just touched him, barely showing the contours of its face and pale skin. Its long black hair was wild, pointed at different angles and thickly knotted in other places. He was dressed in all black, simple clothes, a black button-up shirt and simple trousers. What I could see clearly was the rows of jagged teeth bared into a chilling grin. They reminded more of a shark's hooked teeth rather than a human's straight ones. And the eyes, scarlet with obsidian pupils, scanning me in a way that filled me with primal fear. For a few tense seconds we held each other's gaze, not making any movement. Then, he tilted his head at a slight angle and raised his left arm, pressing the sharp, pointed nails of his fingers against the glass of my window. Clink, clink, clink. Not moving its eyes away, it drummed the talons of its 3 middle fingers in a rhythmic pattern. It was a simple noise, repeated again and again. Clink, clink, clink. I watched in stunned silence as the creature continued with its noise, taunting me. Silently, I reached into my pocket for my phone, dialing the number of the emergency services, never daring to break my line of sight away from him, thinking that if I looked away, the thing would pounce. I quickly dialed and called for the police, explaining how there was an insane-looking man outside of my property. Despite them incessantly saying that I shouldn't be worried if he actually hasn't done anything yet, they promised to send a nearby patrol car to my address. The whole time, the thing just stood there, unmoving apart from its nails rapping against the glass. "I called the police!" I shouted out to the thing. It stopped for a second and tilted its head to the side. At first, I thought that perhaps it had understood me and was about to run off before the police arrived. Instead, it raised its index finger and pressed its nail against the window pane. dragging it down against it with a screeching sound that was muffled slightly by the thickness of the glass. Slightly wincing at the sound, I noticed it was slowly spelling out letters. L-E-T-M-E-I-N. The words sent a shiver up my spine, chilling my very core as the creature looked at me expectantly, its twisted grin unchanging. However, blue and red lights, dim at first then bright, came into view. Although it filled me with an overwhelming sense of relief, the creature didn't seem deterred from its position, still looking at me with those malevolent eyes. A few seconds later, I heard a knocking at the door. "Police, open up!" I heard a muffled male voice call out gruffly. I bolted upright and made my way to the hallway, still keeping my eyes on the thing outside, only breaking away when I turned towards the front door. I sprinted over the short distance, still terrified that breaking contact with the creature would seal my fate. I flung the front door open to see 2 officers outside, the lights on top of the car blinding me. They both had bored, tired expressions on their faces, their eyes showing nothing but disdain towards me. "We received a call from this address about a potential intruder." The officer on the right, straight to the point. If it were any other time, I would have registered his attitude as rude, but I didn't care. Their presence was a newfound comfort. "Oh, thank God. Yes, if you just follow me." I invited them in and promptly led them to the living room. I don't know how long he's been standing." I was cut off mid-sentence by what I saw. Nothing. The figure had gone. The only evidence of his existence were the words he had carved into the glass. I turned to the officers, who looked less than impressed. He was just here. I swear to God." I began to protest, but it seemed like the officers weren't buying it. "Look, sir, there's no one here," the first policeman remarked, his bored voice drawing out. Looking out at the glass door, he then walked towards it to inspect the message. "We'll have a look around the property and see if we find anyone," he said, his brow furrowed. I sighed in relief and thanked them. They were bound to have some evidence, even if whatever it was ran off. They would have surely found something. Footsteps in the grass. This rationalization settled my nerves slightly. They returned shortly after, and I turned towards them expectantly, eager to hear what they had to say. They told me they found nothing. But he was here! Look at what he left!" I cried, running to the glass door and motioning to the message carved into the glass. Calm down, sir. It was probably just some kids playing a prank." I wanted to lash out at the officer, saying why the hell would I want to do something like that? But he cut me off, holding his right hand out while fishing into his breast pockets for his notepad and pen. "Would you mind telling us what you saw?" "Of course." I breathed in, the brief shock I felt settling. I sat down on the couch as the officers looked at me expectantly. I told them everything that I felt was appropriate, how I just moved into the property, how I was just settling in for the night, and how I got surprised. I gave a description of the thing when prompted, noticing the officers raising their eyebrows on certain details as if to say, "Really?" The whole time my eyes would dart to the glass door, hoping the thing wouldn't suddenly turn up. Once I was finished, the officer who was questioning me quickly scanned his notes before he looked back up at me, telling me he was concluding the call. "If you need us, don't hesitate to call us," the second officer said, in a tone of voice that stated the contrary. I went to protest further, but he made it clear that this was the end of the conversation. He and his colleague turned back around and left through the front door. I followed behind them, silently thanking them as they walked away. "Dude, what a weirdo," I heard one of the officers say, his voice in the gravel being shifted, muffled by wood, the volume reducing as the distance between us grew. I was too drained, shocked and upset. Had I imagined the whole thing? That's not possible. The message was still carved into the glass. I returned to the couch with my head in my hands, slumping in defeat. Then I heard it again. Clink, clink, I felt a familiar surge of fear as I turned my head so slowly towards the glass door. There stood the strange man, clinking his fingers against the door just like before, his twisted grin still stretched wide. I didn't think it was possible to be more terrified, but what chilled me further was the red liquid that coated his mouth and hands, dripping down to the floor and staining the pristine glass. The color of the dark shirt was blacker on the chest, where the liquid was soaking into the fabric. All I could do was stare at him. I don't remember passing out. When I awoke, the sun was peeking over the horizon, coating the sky in a blood-red color, as if some higher power were reminding me of the previous night's events. The thing disappeared. I thought at first that this was simply a terribly vivid nightmare, until I looked up at the glass. The carved message and bloodstains still there. Apprehensively, I got up from the couch and went to check for any other evidence. When I reluctantly opened my front door, the only evidence I could see of the police officers was their abandoned car. It looked untouched, with the driver's side door wide open. I decided the only action I could do was to leave. It was obvious I wasn't safe in my home. I quickly packed up a bag and grabbed a few essentials before throwing them into the car and starting up the engine. My plan was to go to the police station in the nearest town myself, explain everything as best I could, maybe stay in a hotel while all this got sorted out. I only made it down to the edge of the forest when I saw them. 2 figures, bloodied and pale, hung from the tree, swaying slightly in the gentle breeze. Though their uniforms were torn and streaked with aging blood, I recognized them as the police officers from the previous night. Below them, where the sunlight's path was blocked by thick branches, was the thing again. Just as before, it locked its malevolent eyes with me and had that eerie grin. I'd once seen lions at the zoo, pacing the glass exterior that separated them from me. They would pace impatiently as they watched me. This thing was pacing the width of the gravel drive the same way, only daring to go the very edge of the shade of the trees. My mind could only draw itself to an impossible conclusion to what this thing was. The only thing I did know was that I was trapped. If I left, the thing would get me. If I called for help, the thing would get them. The police contacted me, telling me they were launching an investigation into the 2 missing officers after they had returned from answering my call. I didn't care. I knew of their fate. The day is the only time I receive any form of respite. The only thing I cared about was the creature. During the day, I could see from my window more officers join the ranks of the hanging bodies. I assumed they were sent to investigate the disappearances. As soon as the sun set beyond the horizon, he'd appear outside my home. Every night, it's the same thing. He comes to any of my windows. It doesn't matter if I'm in my bedroom, living room, kitchen, or bathroom. He's always there, tapping his 3 middle fingers maddeningly against the glass. Sometimes carving or even mouthing the words, "Let me in." I've pleaded with him, I've begged to him, I even tried threatening him. Nothing I do deters him. I don't know how long this has gone on for. I'm terrified to leave my home for anything. I know what he wants, and that he won't leave until he gets it. Until he gets me. I'm so tired. I just want it to end. Maybe I'll let him in.